podcast, Reason and Revolution, Chocolate in the 18th Century. The learning outcomes for this unit are: Number 1, understand the relationship between chocolate and the intellectual culture of the European Enlightenment. Number 2, describe the French philosophes and how they felt about chocolate. Number 3, understand the importance of coffee and social revolution. In this unit, we'll see how the relationship between chocolate and intellectual culture changes, and how another exotic drink, coffee, largely overtakes chocolate as the drink of choice for European intellectuals. Part of this has to do with price. Chocolate is more expensive than coffee and remains associated with the old, wealthy power groups of Europe, namely the nobility. Coffee, on the other hand, is cheaper and becomes the fuel through which revolutions are made. All of these changes are made possible by the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment was an intellectual movement which transformed Europe and eventually the world. It was the culmination of ideas which had been born out of the scientific revolution, where intellectuals had begun to question the authorities of the past and investigate nature themselves. Thus, the Enlightenment applied the principles of the scientific revolution to political and social thought. As such, the Enlightenment questioned the ideas of how countries and political power are organized. Why should countries have kings? Is there a better way for humans to live? The Enlightenment therefore questioned political authority and challenged the status quo. That is, it challenged the old regimes for legitimacy. Out of the Enlightenment, our modern ideas about human rights and representative government emerge. Great thinkers of the Enlightenment were men such as Voltaire, where we get the idea of the separation of church and state, or Adam Smith, who single-handedly invented the discipline of economics, or Montesquieu, who invented the three-part separation of government, which forms the basis of most Western democracies today, or Rousseau, whose ideas led directly to the French Revolution. The stimulant beverages of coffee, tea, and chocolate are the backdrop under which the Enlightenment occurred. By the mid-18th century, coffee houses had sprung up in nearly every major European city. Coffee was the cheapest and most popular drink, but chocolate and tea were served too. One of the important things to remember is that prior to the introduction of these markets, there were no stimulant beverages or drugs in Europe. There was nothing to help one stay awake. There is a school of thought which suggests that stimulant beverages create a night culture that did not exist before. The main drink of choice for Europeans prior to these beverages was beer or wine, neither of which are going to help you stay awake. In any respect, coffee houses would become the center of the Enlightenment and the modern world. Yet, the increasing popularity of these products did not come without a fair share of controversy. Coffee was called an intoxicant and dark liquor. More importantly, coffee houses was where there was dangerous talk in politics. It's in coffee houses that one might hear talk of revolution. The King of England, Charles II, tried to shut down all coffee houses in his country in 1675. He called them places where the disaffected met and spread scandalous reports. In the end, he was unsuccessful, partially because every single member of his government also enjoyed coffee houses too. In France, the great thinkers and writers of the Enlightenment called themselves philosophes, or philosophers. They were the intellectuals of the 18th century. The Enlightenment discussions they generated originated in what historians sometimes call salon culture. That is, private parties held in wealthy individuals' homes for the purposes of debating ideas and politics. However, the ideas of the Enlightenment quickly crossed national boundaries and spread beyond Europe. They promoted ideas of tolerance, universal rights, and distrusted religion and traditional power. For the Philosophes, chocolate, due to its long history with royalty and the Jesuits, was associated with the traditional powers and the church, and as a result, coffee was their preferred drink. Salon culture gave way to a coffee house culture. These institutions became the platform from which the modern world was formed. Some historians have called coffee houses the 18th century internet, for it is in coffee houses that one could find out information around the world. They were places where there was unregulated academic discussion and exchange of ideas. All the major thinkers of the scientific revolution and Enlightenment patronized coffee houses. In one story in particular, the famous early modern scientist Edmund Halley, in a conversation with Isaac Newton in a coffee house, gave Newton the idea for Principia, which is still one of the most important foundational documents of modern physics. Over time, some coffee houses began to specialize in certain topics of discussion. For instance, the Marine Coffee House became a popular London venue for mathematics lectures. Others specialized in astronomy or business. Some coffee shops became centers of knowledge. They became known as penny universities, since you could pay a penny to enter and receive an education. Naturally, coffee houses, especially those in London, also became centers of trade and commerce. It's where one might go to find out the current shipping news, or places to find investors to invest in businesses. One coffee shop in particular, Jonathan's Coffee House, established in 1680, became the place to go if you needed to find investors, or in turn if you had money to invest. The coffee house became enormously popular and very crowded. In 1801, it moved to a new, larger location and was renamed the London Stock Exchange. For a long time afterwards, people still referred to it as New Jonathan's. So the modern economy, in a sense, begins in a coffee house. Another coffee house called Lloyd's, which opened on Tower Street in London in 1688, also has a curious history. It was named after its first owner, Edmund Lloyd. It became a popular place for sailors, merchants, and ship owners, and Lloyd's catered to them with reliable shipping news. Shipping, of course, was a dangerous business to be in, and ships were notoriously unreliable and were easily lost. Owners and investors were often looking for ways to hedge their bets by purchasing insurance from others. It became the basis for the modern insurance industry. Lloyd's is still around, of course. In 2012, Lloyd's of London made a pre-tax profit of £2.77 billion. It is, in fact, one of the largest insurance companies in the world today. I am not sure if they still serve coffee, however. Coffee houses were also places where revolutions were planned. The American Revolution, for instance, was largely planned in coffee houses. The British authorities were well aware of this and called American coffee houses seminaries of sedition. One coffee house in particular, which is depicted on the right there, was very important for the American revolutionaries. That was the Old London Coffee House in Philadelphia. And the French Revolution, arguably the most important revolution for the modern age, actually began in a coffee shop. The story goes that a young lawyer by the name of Camille Desmoulins began the French Revolution from the Café de Foy on July 12, 1789. According to the story, after he heard the bad news that a popular finance minister named Jacques Necker had been fired by the king, he considered it the final straw. He jumped onto his table shouting, "To arms! To arms!" And everybody in the coffee house spilled out onto the street, and the revolution began. So, where does that leave us in the history of chocolate? As coffee arguably fueled the Enlightenment and social revolutions of the 18th century, chocolate remained associated with the elite, an expensive luxury, an example of the excesses of the Ancien Régime. However, in our next unit, we'll see how chocolate transforms during the Industrial Revolution into a cheap product that nearly anyone can afford. We'll see the birth of the chocolate bar and the creation of a modern chocolate culture.